choosing your expert partners for startup growth.
Let's get started. I think our time is also, can we have the help of the timer or not? It's coming. Okay, excellent. Great. So first of all, thank you so much for accepting to join this panel and to share your insights as to, the best way to choose and to select, the experts to support startup growth. Now, let's start first by a little introduction, and I would just give you the floor to briefly introduce yourself, especially from the perspective of your work with MedTech startups. Shall we start from that angle?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here and talking a little bit about choosing your partners. My name is Christian Marinical. I'm a physician by training, and I've been doing MedTech innovation for about 15 years or so. Mainly on emerging markets. So I have done a lot of first-in-human early safety feasibility studies, mainly abroad and in the US too. But that's my focus, doing international research, Latin America and the Caribbean.
Thank you.
Hi, hello, nice meeting you. Stephanie Schur is my name. I'm in MedTech and digital health since a good 20 years by now, and I've been working for a couple of different companies, like really big ones like J&J, Medtronic, but also on the other side, having been a founding member of a startup myself. And I was always in roles related to commercial activities, to market access. And I've decided really to find my own consultancy a good year ago. And I'm focusing, as I said, on digital health and MedTech in Europe and to help smaller companies go to market and commercialize.
My name is Craig Ingram, and I live in Austin, Texas, and I provide commercialization strategy consulting. The company is called International Commercialization Growth Partners, and what we do is three things. We actually help companies eliminate the deficiencies and gaps in their commercialization process, as well as do C-suite fractional support. And we've actually developed a methodology to identify, locate, and eradicate basically what we call the kryptonite in the commercialization process. And so we really help companies put a written multi-page commercialization plan together that averages anywhere, depending on the startup, between 40 and 50 pages. For commercial, tactical, and implementation of the strategy.
Great. As you might notice, we had another guest speaker that unfortunately, due to some health issues in the family, could not join today. Reynard was supposed to bring the funding perspective to the panel discussion. Nevertheless, happy to jump in. My background is very much into access to finance, especially planning the fundraising process from the pre-seed to actually ultimate, commercialization and scale-up stage, everything that you need for those steps. So happy to jump in with some insights in that area. Now, I do believe that before actually thinking about which expert to choose, it's very important to think, what do we really need to have as a prerequisite to be able as a startup to really grow and scale up? Because there are certain directions that need to be taken, and obviously then the experts have to come along that path. So with that in mind, can we have like a quick, round robin answer here as to what do you think, in your opinion, are the topmost or the most important prerequisite from your perspective for a startup to be able to actually move towards growth and scale up?
Sure, happy to jump in. I believe one of them is have your strategy very clear. How do you go from A to B to C until all the steps that you need to have. You need to have that very well defined on, do you go in parallel, do you go little by, how strategically, you have to have that in your head, in your paper. I mean, like your business plan. You know, how do you go step by step to be able to at the end reach what they're specializing on? I go to commercialization, but what do you before? You know, all the stages before, all the steps before.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, it's quite important to be settled in terms of strategy, but I think also from an implementation point of view, what is really important, the clinical value that you want to add, because the clinical value is expressed obviously in clinical data, and that per se also like helps you to get reimbursement. And I think especially like having been active in Europe quite a while, I think the reimbursement part is quite crucial in Europe because they're really cost-sensitive markets, and I think this clinical value is to a certain degree connected to the reimbursement scheme, and that's why I think from an implementation perspective, once you have the strategy, obviously that's the next step that I would go.
I would say that the prerequisite is having a contrarian mindset. And people say, well, what do you mean by that? When you look and analyze at some of the most financially successful serial entrepreneurs, they look at what corporate world or corporate America is doing, and they do the exact opposite, right? When you look and you analyze a serial entrepreneur that does something in multiple industries and yet they've built empires, they're not doing what everybody else is doing. The first thing they do is they put a written commercialization plan in place. Nobody does that anymore. And so I've made it my mission that every single startup, whether they're funded very nicely or whether they're struggling, without a written multi-page commercialization plan that goes from strategy to tactical to implementation, it is like trying to get from New York to Los Angeles in a car, and you don't know where the rest areas are. You don't know where the tire shops are. You don't know where the gas stations are. So how are you going to even scale? Scaling shouldn't even come out of your mouth until your business is working small. What gets you from 0 to 100,000 in revenue is not going to get you from 100,000 to $1 million. And what got you from 100,000 to $1 million is not going to get you from $1 million to 10 million. And out of 32.8 million businesses, at least in the United States, with 500 employees or less, 97.6% of companies never, ever, ever achieve 10 million in annual revenue.
And actually, this is the key thing often discussed nowadays. Like, do we really need to plan? Do we really need to plan in detail? And the reality, and many argue, the things are changing so fast. Why would I spend, my effort and attention and so on to that? But ultimately, if you don't know where and how you are going towards a certain destination, you just won't know if you are pursuing that pathway along the way or if you are moving in the right direction or not.
So I also, maybe a comment from my side, so working on that scheme, I see quite often that people tend to rather want to focus on sales first. So some people tend to think almost that they don't really need a strategy, kind of like, I really want to make money and not spend money on things. But frankly saying, having been part of a startup, I know myself how crucial it is to really focus and to have that specific plan. Unfortunately, we didn't do it well enough, and we were really struggling, especially like in Europe, where you have so many, like 20-something different markets. So really, it's key to focus and have a clear strategy. Yeah, I agree.
That's really interesting, and I have some follow-up questions on that. But what I find also particularly, interesting is how you are actually building on each other in terms of, what's most important. And I would also further add to this. Often startups would go directly for funding, and they might often just go directly for VC funding, because this is what they keep hearing, that is, so much available, and the VCs have the biggest budget to promote themselves. But ultimately, when you move towards, starting up, go to market, later scaling up, do you actually have a good roadmap of fundraising? Do you have a good idea of what is suitable funding at the different stages in the life cycle? Because it's like, otherwise you shoot yourself in the foot, trying to please maybe the VCs when the kind of objectives you need to achieve at an earlier stage are not really aligned. So indeed, I would further add another requirement that I see very often disregarded is the need for a really thorough roadmap to fundraising. Okay, based on some exchanges we had, I think we are aware also of a number of areas that maybe are not so kind of, common sense understanding out there. So if it would be, from your perspective, Christian, to say what's, one requirement for growth that is often disregarded by MedTech or maybe not given enough attention. Is there something in particular that you feel that is not thoroughly put in practice and then it reflects later on in the ability to grow?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things, and I've seen it, like everyone starts like commercialization and funding and all these things, but then one key driven for all these startups out there, I would suggest choose someone with experience to do your clinical studies. You need to have the right partner. And I say this because of experience. I have, companies calling, I have a great ENT in Chile. Has he done research? Oh no, but he's a great surgeon. But research, clinical data, as we see with everything that we do, your data is gonna you need to show data to bring money. If you don't show reliable data, you're not gonna get any funding, and that's key to have. So going back to experience, clinical data, you have to have a good, I call them site management organizations. I have worked with a couple in, again, Colombia, Panama, Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, and they bring a lot of experience to that in the same way that FDA recognized those sites with experience that data is valid, data is, everything. And you need to have results. You need to show results. Otherwise, you're dead in the water, You
just spend a lot of resources on doing those clinical trials that are known to be very challenging.
Yeah.
Okay.
So experience, choose someone with experience, someone who been there, done that,
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Maybe to add from my side, there are a couple of different fields where you can be experienced, right? You can have an experience in a specific geography, you can have an experience in a specific indication, you can have an experience in a specific market model, so B2B or B2C. So I think it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to identify the right market, I think what's super important that you have the tools at hand to really run your analysis, to really understand how big are the markets, what is the reimbursement scheme, what are the structures of the market, who am I even going to be selling to, because there can be a couple of different target groups that might potentially qualify, and that in return also has an impact on reimbursement. So I think there is a couple of different things from a strategic point of view where you need to have the right tools to really understand the market, and there I would say ideally, best case scenario, obviously, you have everything. You know the indication, the KOLs in the local markets. But I think from a strategic point of view, you need to have the right tools to analyze and to understand the markets. And I think the next step, really implementing in the specific market, that's more like an operational thing. And that's where, obviously, if you can identify the right centers or the right KOLs, and the indication inside out, but that's a different approach, I would say. And I think in that regard, that's where the specific market know-how comes into the game, or the know-how of the indication. Yeah. So I think it's different if you talk about implementation or about strategy.
And Craig, if it is to look at the next step, like let's say you actually start pursuing the different markets that you identified, prioritized, shortlisted, and so on, is there something in that pursuit of growth that might be often disregarded, or maybe again not given enough attention? Is there something that you feel that should require more focus?
100%. So people ask me on a regular basis, what aspects of startup growth are not given enough attention? Well, it's a three-prong approach. First of all, people don't know, because it's not taught in MBA programs, that there are 10 components of commercialization. The very first component of the 10 is market research. The vast majority of market research is inadequate and incomplete. It's not done well. And because of that, companies suffer, right? And so the vast majority of market research needs to be taken very seriously, because that leads to really prospect targeting. And so many startup companies are so quick to start hiring salespeople, and the worst thing that can be done is that, because you want to create the awareness first. Prospect targets, for example, at least in the US, Canada, and even Europe, startups want to go for the whales, right? And so since Houston and Texas is represented here, everybody wants to go for the Houston Methodists of the world. That is one of the most ineffective choices that you can make. I always tell C-suite executives, you can hunt for rabbits, you can hunt for deer, and you can hunt for elephants. You should be hunting all three, but the rabbits will feed you for a day, the deer will feed you for a month, and the elephants will feed you for the year. So you've got to shoot a lot of rabbits and deer to get profitable small, because if it doesn't work small, it will not work large no matter how much investment money you have. And from my business coaches, who I've been fortunate to be around, who've had multiple billions of dollars in exits, they say that targeting the low barrier target prospective customers gives you low barriers of entry, gives you much faster customer adoption, and gives you a much more strategic financial healthiness so that you can go after the elephants. And that is not done enough.
So we often keep talking about, the early adopters and making sure that you get those early adopters. Often before that, you need to get those innovators that often are nimble. They might not be the elephants that you are mentioning, but would be that particular small player that gets you in, that allows you to have a little demo, further validation, and then move step by step. It's like you don't run before you walk.
Yes, and the key with this for startups is that when a startup company chooses to focus on what I would call the community-based hospitals, that it gives you a lower barrier of entry and a much potential for a quicker customer adoption, so that you can generate the revenue to help you pay for the longevity of time it's going to take to hunt that elephant and kill that elephant in some way.
And I would also say, almost, because we were talking earlier about hiring sales reps too early, so having done that again myself, we made the same mistake, and I would really say that you need to have a proof of concept in a certain indication or with a certain product of your portfolio, because otherwise you're going to lose traction. If you want to try to do everything at the same time, especially in a fragmented market, it's going to blow in your face, excuse these words, but I think it's really important to have this proof of concept, and this is where people from the outside, like consultants, can sometimes really help you to get this proof of concept and a specific indication, to really know early on what are the drivers for the decision makers, because sometimes you're going into that and obviously you believe in your product, but then you go into that specific market and the value of the product might be perceived differently. So I think we need to get this proof of concept quite early on, and to know if you're on the right track or if you're on the wrong track, but also information if you're on the wrong track might be maybe even more helpful sometimes. So I think this is really crucial to focus on specific topics first, rather than trying to do everything at the same time.
Okay. What about if we move sort of logically to the next step? As a startup, you start having now a good understanding of what would be your prerequisites. But then, who can help you with this? These expert partners. There are often different experts for a particular area. Let's say for the clinical trials, for the market research to make sure that it's thoroughly done, for the fundraising strategy and so on. What do you think that would be the, the key criteria to choose between the different experts in a particular subsector, like clinical trials, regulatory approvals? Those you would also need for sure before attempting to grow.
What I would say is I focus on commercialization. So here in my company at International Commercialization Growth Partners, we come in and we look to, for example, we look to locate, identify, uncover, and diagnose the deficiencies and gaps in the process. And those are the type of people from a commercialization standpoint, because that's all really I focus on, is if you want to find an expert, don't look for background, look for mastery of skill set. Again, everything that I teach and coach and consult with a company is the complete opposite of what is going on, at least in corporate America. Because when you look at corporate America, they're inefficient and mostly ineffective. So if you want to be effective in your commercialization, you gotta bring on an external consultant that has actually proven their mastery of their craft.
So someone very, very specialized in that particular thing you need.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Even if it's clinical trials, you want to bring in somebody who has a reputation of mastering that craft.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically coming back to what I said before. So I think there is a difference between choosing somebody from a strategic point of view or choosing somebody from an implementation point of view. I think, especially from an implementation point of view, sometimes, as we said earlier, you don't need to go direct, so you don't need to have like a direct sales rep. It might as well work out perfectly if you have a distributor or even a sales agent with the specific experience. But I think, again, what you crucially need is somebody with an experience, at least like in this business model, for example, because it's going to be completely different whether it's B2B, whether it's B2B2C. So I think it's really depends on the specific experience in that area. But I also do think that it is a different skill set whether you go try to make a strategic decision where you need to have certain tools or whether you're actually implementing. And then I think it's crucial to know the local markets, because the markets are so different, like especially in Europe. It's really, you cannot cover everything. And if people try to be too general, I would highly refrain from taking somebody who tries to do everything. As I said, I think it's about focus.
Okay. Christian?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Stephanie and Craig. It's and I think I go back a little bit to my first answer. Experience. You have to select the right partner, and as Craig says, and why we're here, the networking. That's why we're here, to know each other. What's your area of expertise? I talked to Stephanie a bit before, and I said, I don't know if I want to go to Europe, I'm going to select a CRO in the US. I want the experience. I want that relationship and networking that someone with the expertise that are represented here can take me to the next, take me to Z,
Yeah.
Take me to going from A to Z.
If you take anything away from today, it's this. Uncommon decisions lead to uncommon strategies that lead to uncommon tactics that lead to uncommon activities that lead to uncommon customer adoption. And that's exactly what C-suite executives need to remember in order for them to be financially successful.
So go against the grain as you started. Okay. Stephanie, maybe you can have a concluding comment.
Even daring to. Yeah, I'm
a big piece of advice.
Yeah, I do think so, but I also think it's really the decision drivers for the ones who use the technology. I think it's really important to understand what is the decision driver for your target group, and I think that's going to
try it now.
Is it better now? So the decision maker so what is the clinical value really, I think, for the decision makers? If you want to understand that, I think that's the core of what I would try to understand, because sometimes you think it's different from what it actually is, and that's why I think that's key to focus on that.
Christian, nothing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what we were all saying, choose your partner, choose who you're working with, the network they have, and the experience that they can bring to you as a startup. Every penny counts. You want to spend it wisely.
Okay. Thank you so much. I would just say maybe one concluding thing that I take from all your insights is that it's important to be as clear, as forward-looking, and as surgical in your selection of partners for going forward. You need to know where you are going. You need to know every step. And then for every step, choose the right person with the right skill, with the right experience, the right background, and go surgical, thorough, deep. Yep. Thank you so much.
Well said.
Now we'll pass on the baton to the next panel. Thank you.